I'm here today with Alexander Adams, one of our fantastic speakers. That's going to be at the event, the 27th to the 29th of August. So, welcome. How are you?
Thank you very much, Maven. I'm very pleased to speak with you. I'm looking forward to the event, and I'm really excited to meet the other people there and to hear what they have to say.
Yes, you've been doing quite a few bits of content with some of the other speakers as well, I hear.
Yes, I've been doing some art streams with Pharaoh and Panama Hat, and yeah, they've been great fun. I've also been doing some interviews with people who are not strictly AA related, so something with the Bournebrook magazine people. And I've also did something with Brian at Glass Blind Spot, and some other interviews that are forthcoming.
Excellent. So, you're a very busy man. How did you get into all of this? You want to give an introduction to who you are and what's your speciality?
Well, basically, I'm an artist and art critic. I do some other writing as well. I'm a poet. But yeah, so the main thing I do is the art and the art criticism. And I got into the art writing in the field of politics, in the relation to cultural politics, in 2015 after the Charlie Hebdo massacre. And with that event, I was not writing so much about the Islamists, but more the way that certain press organizations and certain politicians and institutions were kind of, in effect, running cover for the Islamists, which concerned me very greatly because I thought that that was a greater threat from the institutions and from the people who were supposed to be defending our liberty and our freedom of speech, when they were actually taking sides that were sympathetic to the Islamists. So that was my initiation to sort of politics. So that was 2015. I hadn't done anything political before then. And since then, I've written a few articles. Basically, I'm not sure I'd call myself a reactionary, but all the positions I was taking were reactionary. I was responding to incursions into art history teaching, the idea of decolonizing the curriculum, also the appointment of a political appointee to the position of director of the Tate Gallery, which is the most important position in the arts in Britain. And the director is basically not anyone who has any art history experience. So that's a great concern. Also about the sort of repatriation of colonial era artifacts and various other topics that cover cultural politics. So that's basically how I got into writing about those.
Absolutely. So, this, well, just on that subject, actually, I know George Osborne, I believe, was made, was it the head of one of the museums in London? I can't remember which one. And he's certainly someone with no experience in art and all that. So, is this a new thing where they've been parachuting in people with no experience into these museums and galleries, or does that have a tradition?
I think that sometimes you would get sort of like retired politicians would be sort of farmed off onto the boards of various museums, and that was basically just so that they could schmooze and they could raise funds because they had lots of contacts. They weren't actually making any decisions, so this wasn't a particular problem. Now it is a problem because once you admit that that people's politics, they're able to bring those into institutions in something that I call cultural entryism, which I described in the book Culture War. So once you've got this cultural entryism, you have a culture of people feeling that they can apply their own personal ethics in positions, and they no longer serve the institutions, they no longer serve the public, they no longer serve the nation, they serve themselves and their political cause. And that's a great worry.
Yes, absolutely. So, you mentioned there, you just slid in casually that you've written a book or two. You didn't mention that
Oh
previously. Do you want
well,
to just say what they are?
oh well, yes, I have to, as a dedicated shiller for my own stuff, because no one else would do it for me. Yes, I've written two books. So the first book is Cultural Art, Identity, Politics, and Cultural Entryism, which is a collection of essays with some original material, which basically covers the issues that I've talked about. So censorship, free speech, Islamism, the canon, repatriation, and the impact of political activists going into the cultural sphere. And that was followed up by a book called Iconoclasm, in which I kind of sort of explained the situation for the 2020 outbreak of iconoclasm, which sadly we've got a new bout happening in Canada as we speak. And basically, I was covering the history of iconoclasm and different reasons for it. And that book was published at the end of last year, and it was the first book to try and explain and contextualize the outbreak of iconoclasm in the sort of the George Floyd riots.
Fantastic, very topical. And yes, it's so iconoclasm. Are you covering that just from the 2020 point of view, or are you going into the deep history of it from back in the?
Both deep history. So I was going about the original. So you have this sort of conflict between the purist, because it's a theological issue basically, the idea of the graven image, and you have sort of purists saying, no, you cannot have any graven images at all. And it's interesting, it's not actually just of God. It actually, interestingly enough, applies to all living things. So the purist view is much closer to the Islamist, the Wahhabi vision, which is absolutely no images of anything for any reason. And that's obviously...
Yes, which is how you end up in Iran with the mosaics of fantastic geometrical patterns, but nothing that depicts a human form.
Yes, so you have the calligraphy and you have the writing and the patterns, but you don't have any depictions of actually living beings. And so and then of course there's the other ones who say, well, actually, there's a natural propensity to make art, and we can use art as a channel to contact God, or as a focus for our worship and so forth. And anyway, I trace this back to the Bible. And then I go through and I look at some examples of outbreaks of iconoclasm in Egypt, in the French Revolution, in Nazi Germany, in the USSR, and so forth. And then there's a long section on the 2020 events.
All right, fantastic. And you'll have those books available for people to buy if they so choose.
Yes, I'll have some copies there, and I'll be signing copies. And I believe it's cash only, is it? Or
you can choose if you can accept card. You can you can do that yourself.
Well, I mean, I have a bank account, but I guess however people want to pay is fine.
Sure, no problem at all. So that's who you are, and I think you've got a pretty good CV behind you that should make lots of people interested in hearing what you want to say. So. The event itself, how did you find out about it? How did you come into... Because you actually contacted us at Scyldings. You were one of the first people to say, I'm interested in this. I would love to speak. So why are you particularly interested in this event, and how did you find out about it?
Well, it was listening to AA's streams, which is sort of one of my pastimes. It's a nice way to follow some stuff, some rank punditry and some meta politics and so forth, and sort of various banter about Thomas Carlyle and the terrible state of Britain. And I can listen to that while I'm painting gloomy pictures. So so I heard about it through one of the AA streams, and I contacted you. And you were very fast to respond to me, and it's really exciting because I've done talks before. I've given talks on, curiously enough, on the Beat generation, so like Ginsberg and Burroughs and all that lot. But obviously there's been no events for a little while, so this is a fantastic chance to get out and talk. And this is, I think, this is probably the first sort of overtly political talk. Although I'm going to be mainly, I've written most of the talk itself, and it's going to be covering more things like metapolitics, and also providing some practical ideas about ways forward.
Absolutely. So that practical nature, that's one of the things we're keen to actually focus on this event. I mean, you yourself know, but for the people listening, there's far too much talk, in my opinion, on why things are bad, and not enough talk on what to do about it. And not just what to do about it in a theoretical sense, but actually practically. So we're going to be there in person, and we're going to be in person discussing things and what to do and how to go about it. And maybe there'll be something wonderful that comes out as a result of all these great minds meeting each other and discussing. So
Yeah.
that's
Should be exciting. I don't know if I count as one of the great minds, but I'll be certainly there, listening to the other great minds speaking to each other. And I do agree that it's very easy to get bogged down in the culture wars, and I have mixed feelings about this, because obviously on one level I want to sort of we want to step over that, because we know that getting outraged about the Queen's portrait in an Oxford College common room, you know, you know, doing a 4 minute bit on GB News about that isn't going to win anything in the long run. But at the same time, I do feel like we do need to get engaged in those, and I mean, especially with politics to do with statues, because I was involved in the sort of the Colston thing, which is the Bristol statue, which was toppled and then thrown into the river, and I was quite sort of passionate about saying that this shouldn't have happened and so forth. And you did see this wave of would-be iconoclasts working through councils, getting up petitions, getting up signatures, lobbying to get these statues taken down. And the left is very good at organising and getting involved, and mobilising themselves, and also setting out like a moral framework for what they're doing. And they face relatively little opposition, because a lot of normies are kind of like a bit cowed and reluctant, and then you've got people on the more right-wing reactionary element who say, well, that's a bit cringe, or I don't want to do stuff in real life and stuff. But actually, some people pushing back against those petitions, especially an organisation called SaveOurStatues.org, helped to actually preserve those statues. So there is actually a point to fighting the culture war in small battles in some situations, but I agree that that's not going to solve the problem overall.
Yes, so there'll be some people at the event, I'm sure, that will take the opposite point of view, which is to accelerate and let things collapse essentially, and then from there you rebuild. So there'll be some interesting debate back and forth between your side and that side.
Well, I will set out my stall here without going into detail, but basically, if you're interested in the preservation of culture, and this has come up, so this is the one stumbling block to accelerationism. If you're interested in preserving culture, accelerationism is not an option. You don't want to see your cathedrals torn down. You don't want to see your museums gutted. You don't want to see your Canova statues smashed or sold. So if you're deeply involved in the preservation of historical artifacts, which is part of my bread and butter as an everyday art critic, which is what I mainly do, accelerationism is not an option. So obviously I have to present some alternatives, and that's what my speech is going to cover.
Absolutely. One of my pet interests is the history of China, and yeah, you want to talk about destruction of cultural artifacts, and
Yes, yeah.
not
Yes,
just
that was actually one of my chapters in the iconoclasm book, is discussing the situation in China in sort of 66 to 76, the Cultural Revolution, which absolutely wiped out much of China's historical materials.
yes, but I mean, if you go back into even deeper Chinese history, you can see it's a recurring theme. I mean, Mao took things to extremes, but so much of the older dynasties' works were just wiped out by subsequent ones, and it's a real shame, because there's some fascinating stuff that we think were there, but it's just there's no evidence of it anymore, or very little. So the Terracotta Army, that was only rediscovered this century, essentially.
Yes, because it was concealed. People didn't know about it until it was actually revealed. Yeah.
Right, and that was the time of Alexander the Great, and it's one of the biggest works of the ancient world, and it was just completely hidden, and that was probably done deliberately in knowing Chinese history. So this is a recurring problem that we need to figure out how to solve.
Yeah, and you also get. I also saw that when I was researching the section in the book on Egyptology. So obviously sometimes you had rulers defacing the images of previous rulers, and then of course there's a whole business about sort of preserving the bodies, embalming them, and then basically putting them inside mazes, inside pyramids, so that they wouldn't get robbed out. Almost the second they were closed up by the tomb builders. That there was this sense of that you had to, because obviously in ancient Egypt there was a lot to do with the preservation of the physical body would guarantee the preservation of the soul as well. So that was why it was such a big thing.
Yes. So you're going to be talking. Well, we don't want to go too much into detail on the actual speech, but we can give some hints. So you're going to be giving your ideas on how to reverse some of this, how to fight back, and create parallel institutions as well, I believe.
Yeah, so I won't give you too many details, but yeah, basically, so my abstract is sort of considering the unique challenges dissenters face in a time of progressive capture of organisations. Clear thinking and effective deployment of resources is essential. So this talk will outline the pitfalls dissenters must avoid, the role of a vanguard vis-a-vis populism in advancing dissenting cultures, and the potential and problems for parallelism in physical culture. There will be positive suggestions regarding networks, nodes, decentralization and ways of funding, dissident production and maintenance of the arts. And subjects such as the Benedictine option will come up, wise uses of resources, the problem with accelerationism, which I've kind of a little bit hinted about, globalism, regionalism, in-group preferences, so a lot of familiar stuff for AA listeners.
Fantastic.
The other AA, that is the fake AA. I'm the real AA.
Yes, well, we might introduce you both as AA in the event and just let people guess who it's going to be.
Yeah, and they'll be very well. Of course, they won't know by looking, but of course, as soon as I open my mouth, they'll be terribly disappointed and shuffle on to the next auditorium.
Oh no, we're gonna make everyone watch everything. We're gonna force them. No, well, not quite. But yes, no, it should be good. You mentioned your art history as well, so you listened to unpopular opinions, and you said paint gloomy paintings. So, what type of art do you actually produce?
It's a variety of stuff, actually. If people are interested, they can go to alexanderadams.art and they can see the pictures for themselves. So there are landscapes and there are figures and nudes and defaced portraits. So these are sort of figures where the face has been painted over, it's been scratched out or splashed over with other paint. And all of these paintings are in black and white. So it's a combination of being quite representational and also a little bit abstract. There are also some drawings as well, which are, some of those are done from life. So sometimes I'm working from photographs and sometimes working from life. I do actually do some colour works, but I've not exhibited them for many years. So I have this dream that maybe sort of after I die, someone's going to sort of break into my studio and discover all these amazing works in colour and say, if only we could have asked him about them, we'd understand them better.
Are they influenced by your politics at all? I know we used actually one of your faceless images on one of our videos to advertise the event.
Oh yes, I saw that. That was good fun, actually. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
So, does your political viewpoint or your innate conservatism influence, do you think, your art or significantly?
I would say it influences my respect for and my use of tradition and traditional skill, traditional materials, and so forth. So there is that. In some respects, of course, if you turn your back on, I turn my back on postmodernism. So in that sense, I suppose I would be classed as reactionary. But actually, aesthetically speaking, I'm more aligned with sort of modernism. So I'm not actually a traditionalist per se. I think that's one of the fun things about the streams that I do with Panama and Ferro, is that they're slightly more traditionalist and I'm slightly more modernist. So I'm actually closer to John D, to Mr. D, because he's a big fan of modernism and so forth, and that's my taste as well. Sadly, I think that actually my apolitical art, because I think of it as largely apolitical, I mean, apart from like maybe its aesthetic stance, apart from it being pretty much apolitical, I think that I've probably been blacklisted from British institutions because of my essays, which are political.
Isn't that a mark of achievement rather than anything else?
Well, you see, I mean, I don't know if it's because of my politics or because of my skin color or my sexuality. Because the problem is, just to be white and just to be straight, you're already on a hiding to nothing. You know, you're not hitting their diversity quotas. You're not ticking any of their boxes. So I
No.
don't. I should imagine that the combination of my demographic characteristics and the fact that I have been critical of the Arts Council and the Tate and the ICA and so forth. I'm sure that those have sort of all combined to make me a persona non grata. So I don't know how much credit I can take for actually actively participated in this participation in this blacklisting.
Well, that is another issue, actually. I know my local council recently put out some grants for pieces of art to be displayed around the city, and it's there in a caveat at the bottom: black artists only. And it's like I don't particularly know why, because our city is not the most black, to be honest. There's other ethnicities, but
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you do see that both postmodernism and identity politics, from the left perspective, are both sort of the vanguards of globalism, which is it's troubling. I mean, if you look at it in its most benign sense, you can say, well, oh, they're just a bit jealous because big cities have loads of ethnic minorities who can sort of take premier positions in arts funding, and they just want to be like they don't want to be the country bumpkin, so they ape what their sophisticated cousins are doing, as it were. I think that's perhaps the most generous interpretation we can put on it.
yes, I'm sure there's some of that. That's certainly the case in the business world, where you copy the HR policies of the bigger companies just because they think it's best practice.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think a lot of people are just followers of fashion, or they don't really understand it. I mean, in the talk, I actually talk about being the outer party, the inner party, and the upper party. And the upper party really know what they're doing, but they're the decision makers. They're the top intellectuals. The inner party, they're the leaders of museums. They're the leaders of organisations. They're on various funding committees and stuff. They are the upper party, but they're not the inner party.
Yep. All right, that sounds very interesting to me. I think that's given our audience a good taste of who you are and what you're going to be speaking about and why they should come to the event. So we'll wrap it up here. And unless you have any closing comments.
No, just that I'm really pleased to have this chance to speak, and looking forward to seeing people. And I know that this is going to be sort of not recorded, so this is going to be sort of exclusive content, I think.
Absolutely. Exclusive content for those who
Yeah.
are.
So this is an exclusive content for the Vanguard only.
Absolutely. We don't want to. So that's a selling point, in my opinion. No one else will know what's going on unless you actually come to the event. And it also gives you a bit more privacy as well. So you don't have to be worried about what is said behind our closed doors.
Yes. Well, I did notice I'm the only one who's been foolish enough to put his real name
Yes. Well,
to this event. But the thing is that people know basically what my position is, although they won't know the content of this speech, and I'll be talking about new stuff that I've never talked about before. They do know roughly what they're going to get with me already, and I hope that maybe that will draw in a few people who are not AA fans or YouTube followers, but are more followers of my essays and my art criticism.
no, that would be fantastic. So great. Thank you very much. And we'll see you all in August.
Looking forward to it.